Hello, BookTube. Today I'm continuing my reprise of the alphabet tags created by Jim of Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. Today, W. W is for werewolf. Have you read any books about werewolves? This prompt is giving me some trouble, and I don't remember how I handled it back in 2021. So, for the most part, werewolves do not play much of a role in my reading. None of the science fiction and fantasy I've read really features werewolves. I haven't read any folklore or histories about the werewolf figure. Werewolves don't really play much of a role in the manga I've read, or at least in a way that they are focused upon. But there is a werewolf story in a comic book, or collection that I have that is rather spicy. It's called The House of Moorcock by Joe Phillips. Joe Phillips is an illustrator of comics and other illustrations, usually targeting a gay audience. Although not all of his work has been for a gay audience, he's also written superhero comics as well. But he had a collection about 20 years ago now, called The House of Moorcock, in which a super twink named Jonas Moorcock goes on a number of adventures that ends up with him having sex. And the first story in this collection is Jonas going on a date with a young man who turns into a werewolf. And Jonas and the werewolf get it on. W is for witch. What is the last book you read about a witch? I'm going to say Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle by Clamp. The character of Yuko, who is a recurring character in Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle, but is a major character in the sister series Exholic, is called the Space-Time Witch. She's a witch who, in a way, exists outside of time. And she makes deals with various individuals across many different dimensions. And she utilizes her magic to help them for a price. Also in Exholic, you can make the case that the magicians, wizards, Fady Flowright, and Sioran are also witches, depending on your definition of a witch. W is for wizard. Who is your favorite literary wizard? So for this, I'm going to go with 3 characters from 3 of my favorite manga series. Yuno from Black Clover. Yuno is the best friend of Asta, the main character. So Black Clover is by Yuki Tabata. And it's about Asta, a young man who has no magical powers, who wishes that who aspires to become the Wizard King. He's aided in this quest by possession of a black grimoire that allows him to draw a sword that possesses anti-magic capabilities, making him a perfect opponent for rogue wizards. Yuno is Asta's best friend. They were both orphans and raised at an orphanage on the outskirts of the Clover Kingdom. And while Asta has no magical talent, Yuno has magical talent in spades. He is a prodigy. And while Asta joins the Black Bulls, Order of Magical Knights, who are composed primarily of outcasts, Yuno can take his pick. I think everybody, even the most class conscious orders, wanted him. And Yuno picks the most prestigious of the orders, the Golden Dawn, and quickly rises to fame and prominence within the Golden Dawn. And I love Yuno's character. He is amazing. He doesn't appear often in Black Clover, but when he does, it's special. He is just a wonderful character. Particularly during the raid on the Spade Kingdom. That is wonderful. And also his sort of adventures towards the end of the series. My second favorite is Judar from Magi the Labyrinth of Magic by Shinobu Ohtaka. Judar spends most of Magi as an antagonist to the heroes Aladdin and Alibaba. However, towards the end, he undergoes something of a turn, largely due to the fact that a young man that Judar is friends with turns to the hero's side at the end of the story. And so while Judar is still quite the jerk, he does help the heroes in the final storyline. And finally, I'm going to go with Natsu Dragneel from Fairy Tale by Hiro Mashima. Fairy Tale is a story about the adventures of the Wizarding Guild Fairy Tale with Natsu as the main character. Natsu is a fire dragon slayer. He can use fire for various magical effects, which he was taught by the dragon Igneel. And he is just a really fun character. W is for women writers. What percentage of the books you read or the books you read are written by women? I don't know the exact numbers. I've never really made a count year by year of how many male authors I read compared to female authors. W is for war. What is your favorite book about World War I? I don't have one. World War I is one of those topics that I have a hard time reading about. W is for Washington, White House, and worst. Would you consider James Buchanan to be the worst U.S. president? Well, the Civil War pretty much started on his watch, and he did everything he could to help it along. So in that way, he's certainly in the bottom of American presidents. But there's also Richard Nixon, who the exposure of his criminality drove him from office. And then you have the previous president, and soon to be the next president, Donald Trump, whose incompetence and mismanagement of the country as president goes without saying. So I think ultimately how I would rank these three are, I think Nixon's probably the third worst president. While he was certainly a crook and the exposure of his criminality drove him from office, he did set up the EPA. He did the rapprochement with China. So those were good things. But the criminality certainly keeps him at the bottom. I think James Buchanan would be the second worst. And Trump, I think, comes in as the worst. Insanity. Anyway. W is for Warhol. Warhol said, "Art is whatever you can get away with. Would you consider Away from the Flock by Damien Hirst or My Bed by Tracey Emin to be art?" This again is a bit of a conundrum. On the one hand, there's my own artistic taste, which I think is fairly broad. I like more traditional forms of artwork and styles, as well as more avant-garde, more experimental forms of art. Although, but I'm not arrogant enough to say that just because I don't like something doesn't necessarily mean that it's not art. That said, having looked at Away from the Flock, which is lamb encased in, or in formaldehyde encased in acrylic, is I don't like it. It's not something that I find aesthetically pleasing. But if a critic wants to call it art, and somebody who has a macabre sense of art views it as beautiful or as desirable to have in their collection, it's art. The same goes with the piece by Tracey Emin. It doesn't appeal to me. I wouldn't want to have it in my collection if I were wealthy enough to have an art collection. But somebody likes it. Somebody likes it. There is no accounting for taste. Anyway, so the next tag is W is for wood. The return of the log cabin prompt. You are once again in a log cabin with no internet and no Kindle. There are 6 books in the cabin. Meridian by Alice Walker, The Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear, The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. So which of these books would you read first? Which would you leave to last? And you may also rank the books if you so wish. I've read The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I've never read Meridian. I've never read The Bonfire of the Vanities or The Time Machine, although I have read War of the Worlds. I've never read Maisie Dobbs or The Chrysalids or Fingersmith, so I can't really judge any of these 6, nor say which one I would read first or last. I think I would just burn the cabin down. So the next prompt is W is for Wales. Have you been to Wales? No, I have not. W is for Wuhan. Have you read a book about a pandemic, real or fictitious? So I read. So part of the storyline of A Home at the End of the World by Michael Cunningham is about the HIV/AIDS pandemic. I don't know if I've read. And of course, HIV/AIDS is a lurking threat in much gay fiction of the 80s and into the 90s. As also Men from the Boys by William Mann, I think, does feature HIV/AIDS as well. I think that's all I can think of. W is for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Are there any books or writers which intimidate you? No. There's just me needing to get into the mood to try them out. W is for We the Drowned by Carsten Jensen. Have you read any books using the first person plural we for much of the narration? No. W is for word games. Do you have a favorite word game? No. W is for writing. Have you written any books? No. Not yet, anyway. The bonus prompts. W is for Wa. Do you prefer Evelyn or Oberon? I've never read either one. W is for Wikipedia. Do you use this as your principal source of reference? Yes. W is for World Wide Web. Do you have a favorite website? Probably pals.com and bookpeople.com. And my favorite university presses. W is for Weir. Have you read The Martian and or Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir? Did you like it or them? So, about 2 years ago, one of my aunts, when she came to visit my mom, brought a box of books from her younger son to bring to me. And one of those books was The Martian by Andy Weir, which I think I tried last year for my back to school project. And I didn't like it. It's about a astronaut on a Mars mission who ends up getting stranded. And he has to live on Mars by himself for several months or several years before they can effect a rescue. And so part of the novel is told from his logs, and the other part is the people at NASA trying to rescue him. I didn't like it. I thought the logs were clearly written for a audience. It didn't seem believable, because when you're doing a log, would you really be explaining all the scientific principles? Your audience should know this. So you would basically just be focusing on the bare information of what's going on. And the dialogue on the NASA side of things just sounded really wooden. So I didn't like the book and bailed on it and got rid of it earlier this year. And finally, W is for World. Do you have a favorite book about the circumnavigation of the world? No, I don't. So that was the W tag. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. And I will see you next week with the final 2 installments of my reprise of the alphabet tag. So until then, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.